Today on Locked On Rockies, have we seen the last of these familiar faces in purple?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 24th day of October in the year 2022. I am your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team each and every single day. And if your team is I was going to say in what? That doesn't make any sense. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, well, guess what? You are in the right place, because guess what? My favorite team is the Colorado Rockies, too. I'm your Rockies fan extraordinaire, Paul Holden, and we are talking about on Locked On Rockies today about some faces that might be leaving and maybe a surprise trade, perhaps. A couple of things from Purple Row that I found interesting from last week that I caught up on over the weekend that I want to talk about today, and we're going to have a quick note about the approach and kind of our philosophy about the show and our thoughts about being the Locked On Rockies podcast, in case you might have saw some stuff about podcast hosts over the weekend and things of that nature. But before we do that, there are people that help make this show possible. And today's episode of Locked On Rockies is sponsored by SimpliSafe Home Security. With Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe, 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police response. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Visit simplisafe.com/LockedOnMLB to learn more. We head over to Purple Row now, folks, and Skylar Timmons writes, the future may be uncertain for these Rockies. The offseason is quickly approaching, and decisions concerning the 40-man roster will soon need to be made. The group gets interesting because there are a number of factors to consider. That's in reference to pre-arbitration players here that the Rockies have to consider. There's age. There are projections of production, and there's experience in the big leagues. They're going to have to split some hairs when they're deciding how to craft the big league roster while opening room on the 40-man to protect prospects they hope to retain in the Rule 5 draft. Here are the names that Skylar notes. And you might be like, oh, why? It looks kind of different again. I have two monitors now. I'm fancy. Wow. I can look at two things. So hopefully I'm going to be able to bring you less downtime looking things up, and I'm going to be able to get you with the stats and things more fast. But this first one from Skylar, I think, is exactly right. I think this player has run out of chances in Colorado. I think there's just far too many players that you're concerned with. There's one player in particular that gets in the way of this player getting any more playing time, and that is Sam Hilliard. And Skylar writes here again, Purple Row, the future may be uncertain for these Rockies, by Skylar Timmons over here. It's feeling more and more likely that Sam Hilliard's days as a Rocky are coming to an end. Since his strong September debut in 2019, his ability to produce and stick in the big leagues just hasn't happened. In 2022, he played in 70 games with the Rockies, batting 184, 280, 264, with just 9 extra base hits, 2 of which were home runs. He showed some good signs of improved plate discipline by lowering his strikeouts a bit and making more contact at time, but it still leaves a lot to be desired. We have seen a lot of Hilliard's potential shine in AAA Albuquerque. In 37 games there this season, he batted 308, 405, 669 with 13 home runs. He also struck out just 39 times and drew 21 walks in 158 plate appearances. For some reason, Hilliard hasn't been able to make things click at the big league level, despite having excellent defensive skills and speed. Maybe the time the Rockies cut him loose so he can benefit from a change of scenery and a new organization can figure out how to tap into his potential. I think that's the case. I don't necessarily know if you believe in enough with Sam Hilliard to start him over Jonathan Daza. Sam Hilliard is certainly not going to start over Chris Bryant, and Sam Hilliard probably wouldn't start over Charlie Blackmon or Randall Grichuk as well. There are 4 players easily that you start ahead of Sam Hilliard, and like we see, like Skylar pointed out, and like we've seen, the down on the strikeouts is great, but Sam Hilliard's big thing when he first burst on the scene was power, was big bat, was the ability to put the ball over the wall or extra base hits. And only generating 9 of them at the major league level is an issue and has been something that the Rockies just can't keep banking off of some of these prospects we've seen for a few years now. Sam Hilliard he hasn't had a ton of time at the major league level. He's come up and down. It's not like his career is that long, but he's been up and down with the Rockies, playing some form of Major League Baseball since 29 as we looked. And in 2019, he hasn't even really come close to that batting average or anything that he set when he only played in the 27 games in 2019. I mean, that's a pretty great 273, 356, 649 with a 1.006 OBS in the 27 games that he played in 2019. He hasn't come anywhere close. Granted, he's had a lot more opportunities, but even if you look at the jump from 87 plate appearances to 114 from 19 to 2020, obviously a weird year. I always like to kind of say that when we're talking about the stats, but he decreases from batting average from 2 to 210, his OPP to 272, and his slugging to 438, and his OPS at 710. He hasn't been able to have an OPS over 700 or over 757, I guess is the highest. So over 760 since his first season. And this year he was down across the board with having nearly the most amount of plate appearances and starts that he's had. The Rockies have given him over 600 plate appearances. He's played in over 200 games for the Rockies. You have the data and everything to suggest that it's just not working. The defense is a good thing. He definitely can, that helps the Rockies at Coors Field, but there's not enough from Sam Hilliard to keep you more intrigued than the next person on Skylar's list here, which is Connor Joe, which is unfortunate, but you kind of have to look in the context of Connor Joe's career. There was the big flash. He's been the journeyman before, and we didn't see Connor Joe at all in the second half, and there's just so many more players. On the flip side here, I'm going to dive into Skylar's words first. I think Connor Joe is going to become the new utility player for the Rockies, and I see your question in the chat there, Angel. We'll get to that here in just a second, but let's dive into Skylar's words here for Connor Joe. The decision could go either way, but thanks to the arrival of Sean Bouchard and Michael Toglia, Connor Joe may find himself as an odd man out this offseason. Joe started the season as the everyday designated hitter, spending most of the first half in the role. However, he began to drop off around the start of July and struggled mightily in the second half. After the All-Star break, Joe played in 26 games and hit just 139 with a 475 OPS and 2 home runs. Joe is 30 years old now, and Skylar could see the team holding on to him for his presence in the clubhouse as well as positional versatility. He still brings value to the team, but with Bouchard becoming a strong parallel, it may force the Rockies to go with a younger model with more upside. Either way, Joe deserves a place on a big league team somewhere, and if it's the Rockies, then that's all right. I'm exactly in the same boat there. Connor Joe sticking with the Rockies is going to be fine because you're fine with Connor Joe filling in the roles. You're not fine with Connor Joe taking away a lot of Sean Bouchard's reps, and it doesn't look like the Rockies are willing to do that. If the Rockies were willing to do that and keep turning to Connor Joe, then he would have played more. I know that there was some injury stuff with Connor Joe in the second half of the season as well, but he would have played more if the Rockies were more confident in giving him that time. The one thing that we can really say about some of these players that are facing free agency for the Rockies is this season, the Rockies bought in and went to their prospects. That showed a commitment to them and gave them extended looks, meaning I wouldn't be surprised if the Rockies are going to turn to all these players. We could see very similar rosters and very similar 40-man rosters that we saw at the end of this season with the Rockies this year. I know it gets shrunk down to the smaller ones and things of that nature. And when they expand, they don't get as big. But I could see the Rockies really leaning in and keeping most of their prospects engaged, like Bouchard and Toglia. But Connor Joe, unless he thinks that he has a better opportunity elsewhere, would be a really nice fit to have on your bench. Then you always have a good DH option. You have a solid infield. You have someone that can play first base. You have someone that can play your corner outfield positions. You have someone for depth. And having Connor Joe as your piece of depth is good. And so I hope that Connor Joe stays with the Rockies. I like what Joe can do. It's unfortunate that his cold streaks are so cold, but anyway, I think that he is really going to be, I think he's a nice piece to keep around for the Rockies as your utility player. Utility players and depth are not a bad thing, especially if you can bring Joe back for the right price. We'll dive into a question from the live chat, and we will dive into the rest of the list here listed by Skylar Timmons, a couple of names. But before we do that, got to tell you about some of the folks that help make this show possible, and that's SimpliSafe. As everyone knows, athletes rise and fall in the ranks, but when it comes to saving money, SimpliSafe always stays on top. And right now, you can save big with SimpliSafe Home Security. They're giving Locked On Rockies listeners 40% off their advanced security system. SimpliSafe was just named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. With 24/7 professional monitoring, when a threat is detected, SimpliSafe's monitoring professionals promptly contact you and dispatch first responders to your home, even if you're away or unable to respond. 24/7 professional monitoring costs under $1 a day, and that's less than half the cost of ADT's traditional professional installed plans. SimpliSafe blankets your home with protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real, pardon me, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Don't miss the chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb today. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. Go today. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. In the live chat here, Angel17 says, do you think CJ Cron is getting traded? The interesting thing with CJ Cron and getting traded this year it really should have happened to get the max value for him as he was an all-star. You could have gotten the best value possible for him. But if CJ Cron comes out to have a solid year and a pretty good year, then the Rockies could trade him again. He's going to be if he can come out and swing it consistently and cut down on the strikeouts. That's got to be one of the big things we see from CJ Cron next year is how he handles plate discipline and his approach. The Rockies could flip him again at the deadline and turn to their prospects. They have the future at first base in the organization. They have Montero, they have Tolia, they have both of them there who can play first base, and we just mentioned Connor Joe. CJ Cron could still very much be traded, but will the Rockies do that before the season starts? I don't think so, but Stefano Sanchez, a name I'm not sure, I don't recognize usually, so if this is your first time chatting, thank you so much for coming into the live chat. He says we need relief pitching and starting pitching, one or two. And that's a great point. CJ Cron would be the type of player you could move and get something back in return. And when you look at the pending free agents that are coming this offseason, there are lots of veteran pitchers that you could go out and go after to bolster up your rotation. The Rockies, it depends on how much money they have and are willing to spend this offseason to beef up things, especially if they think they're contenders. They're going to have to compete with two teams that are very hungry now for that World Series as the Dodgers fall short and the Padres come up short. Two teams in your division are going to be very active going after some of the best. How are the Rockies going to keep up with that? Or is their plan just let's go for the wild card? But CJ Cron could be an option on how you get a relief pitcher or a starting pitcher. Let's bounce back over here to Purple Rose piece that Skylar Timmons wrote. The future may be uncertain for these Rockies, and it's another Rocky that I think I'm pretty sure the ship has sailed, and you will not be seeing with the team much longer. Dom Nunez, simply out of necessity for catching depth, Dom Nunez could remain in the Rockies organization, but there's also the possibility that they begin shuffling things at catcher. The general conclusion seems to be that his spot on the depth chart has dropped quite a bit. Brian Servant emerged as a glove first backup with some bat potential. Sounds familiar. And Elias Diaz holds down the starter job. Nunez has struggled through his 3 seasons of big league playing time, posting a 180 average with a career 34% strikeout rate. Things improved in AAA this season, but still leaves a lot to be desired offensively. His defense is still his saving grace, so he could hold on to a spot, but Nunez may find his time running out if he doesn't take some promising steps forward to stay ahead of the promising offensive capabilities of other prospects. All right. Thanks so much, Stefano. I appreciate you tuning in from Costa Rica. That is incredible. I appreciate you, and I thank you so much for being a fan of the show. And I'm glad you're here asking questions. But to go back to our Dom Nunez point there, I just think the Rockies, one of their biggest prospects is a catcher. You have 2 catchers already. Dom Nunez, you just can't afford to have someone not doing anything on offense. The Rockies still get low production from the catcher category. Elias Diaz still puts the ball over the wall and has those moments of really solid offense that is fine with making him still your everyday starting catcher. His defense and his errors are something on the other side. But when you flip it, you have Brian Serven who played fine enough and is young enough that you can still give him the same opportunities. I'd rather see Serven get the opportunities, and I'd rather see Diaz be the game manager or just be the one that the Rockies rotation is the most familiar pitching with, because he's been the Rockies catcher now for a couple of seasons. Dom Nunez, a 34% career strikeout is just unacceptable and just something the Rockies can't afford to continue to do. The Rockies already strike out far too much, and you just can't be relying on players that are going to strike out a lot. Dom Nunez hasn't necessarily done the thing, and you're exactly right, Stefano. Romo is coming. Literally one of the biggest names in the Rockies prospect system is a catcher. I think you're okay buying the time with just with your Serven and your Diaz, but as Skyler points out there, depth could be one thing as well. But I mean, Dom Nunez won't be out of AAA if that's the case. I think the Rockies will continue to just run Diaz and Serven next year. And here's the final one that Skyler writes, and it's an interesting one. Wynton Bernard. This may come as a difficult decision for many folks due to the nature of the story. Wynton Bernard spent a decade in the Myers until he finally broke through and made his big league debut with the Rockies. It was an emotional journey and one of the best stories for the Rockies this season when they gave him a chance, earned his spot on the roster, and it's unfortunate he wasn't able to do more at the big league level. However, as Skyler writes, 2022 saw Bernard showcase that he's deserving a big league spot, either with the Rockies or somewhere else. In a brief 12 games, Bernard hit 286, 310, comprised of his 12 hits, a double, 3 RBI, and 3 stolen bases with 8 strikeouts and 0 walks. In Albuquerque, where he's truly shined, he had 21 home runs with a 977 OPS and drove in 92 runs. The Rockies could elect to retain Bernard and give him an honest shot, but with an already crowded outfield, there doesn't appear to be much room for a 32-year-old rookie. Ultimately, the Rockies' roster decisions continue to loom. The team will need to reassess and readjust while giving new faces a chance to prove themselves and bring something different to the club. The team will have to split hairs, make some decisions that may feel tough emotionally, but could be beneficial to both teams and the players moving forward. That's, Wynton Bernard would be a tough one, but again, if he can get an opportunity and the Rockies can help him get there and get something in return, why not go for it? That's kind of much. But hey, you know what? If the Rockies decide to give Wynton Bernard and he's got a spot for a little bit, I'm not going to be too upset about it, especially when it's probably going to be low value and interesting utility that you can provide when the thing that you'd like to see more for Bernard is is walks. He needs to walk. The Rockies need to walk more. But that's a whole bigger thing as well. But not a ton of strikeouts there, but that's a pretty solid line in those 12 games. But if he was given the right opportunities, who knows what Bernard can do. But 32-year-old rookie with the Rockies having a lot of exciting outfield prospects and already a clogged outfield is bringing Bernard and committing to that really the best move for the Rockies? I don't necessarily know, but could be an interesting little piece to add into a trade to add a little more value and clear up some space as well and help get him to another opportunity. We're going to stick with Purple Row and another interesting thing of Rocky not with the team anymore, something that I thought was kind of shocking. But before we do that, check this out. Locked On Rockies, we're streaming on YouTube. If you've subscribed to Locked On Rockies on YouTube, you can be part of the live chat, just like Angel17 and Stefano Sanchez have been today. You can follow us on Twitter at LO Rockies. You can follow me at Paul Holden33. Another thing from Purple Row that I found interesting this week, or from this weekend, trading Brendan Rodgers could be for the best. And I said, a what? Kenneth Weber over here says, after years of waiting for the former third overall pick Brendan Rodgers to become an established big leader, Colorado Rockies fans finally saw a glimpse of his potential in 21 and were eager to see him reach the next level in 22. However, it's safe to say the 22 season could not have gone off to a worse start at the plate for Rodgers. Over his first 21 games, Rodgers slashed a horrific 165, 221, 241, resulting in a comically low 15 WRC+. This extremely sluggish start was just one of the numerous ailments the Rockies suffered during the season, but Rodgers did eventually come around, posting a 283, 343, 438 line after his horrendous first month, while appearing in a career-high 137 games. He was one of the few bright spots of the 2022 season, Colorado's fourth straight losing campaign. His production with the bat translated to him being a top 10 second baseman in the league while playing defense at a Gold Glove-worthy level. Finally, the evolution of Rodgers from prospect to above average regular was a reality. But in the end, where did it get the Rockies? Rodgers was good, but the team still posed an abysmal 68-94 record. Could a better start from the plate from him change the Rockies' fortunes? Sure, but not enough to put the team back in the playoff picture. Let's see. The truth is there were too many broken facets of the Colorado Rockies organization outside of Rodgers that led to the team's demise. Foremost was the lost debut season of Chris Bryant. The lineup mostly absent. Bryant came out to a 13.2 FWAR for the season, a bottom third figure that barely surpassed the Washington Nationals and Kansas City Royals, and a well below average 86 WRC+, which came in 26th. On top of the woeful offense, the team featured a starting rotation that leaned too heavily on Kyle Freeland, Germán Marquez, and Antonio Senzatella, only to see all but Freeland suffer disastrous results. The worst part, it would not be surprising to see Colorado run out of product much the same next season, with only ancillary changes along the way. Those possible fifth, sixth, and straight losing seasons could also be the last 3 years of Rodgers on the roster, as 2023 will mark the first of his 3 arbitration-eligible seasons before being able to test free agency. The prospect pool is currently heavy on position player talent, and with Ezequiel Tovar likely entrenched at shortstop, existing infield prospects like Adel Amador, Julio Carreras, or even Warming Bernabel could fill his spot at second base in time. The pitching crop, however, has less luster to it and has suffered major setbacks in recent seasons, with injuries hampering top arms like Peter Lambert, Chris Mahom, Helleris Olivares, and Peter Lambert. With the current group of pitching prospects facing serious questions about their long-term outlook, the Rockies would be wise to add to that group to help balance the talent flowing to the major league team when their time comes. Selling high on veteran pieces like CJ Cron and Daniel Bard would seem like the easiest path to accomplishing that, but the club has already shown how little they care for that idea. So maybe hanging the available sign on Rodgers is worth exploring. There's more on that there that you can read at Purple Row. I don't want to dive too much into it. And yes, if the Rockies make a trade for Brendan Rodgers that refills, restocks, and gets you good pitching. For example, say the Rockies make a deal with Miami. I don't have pitching names right off the top of my head. Or say Seattle or something like that, where you can get pitching back. Houston, LA, New York, any of these teams with really good bullpens, if you could make a deal for Brendan Rodgers and replenish and not only get MLB ready talent or a crop of soon to be MLB ready talent, you're not going to hate that trade, because the possibility of the Rockies being bad and having 3 straight losing seasons is not out of the question right now. However, I would take the different approach of taking out and selling and going off of the veterans. As great as Daniel Bard has been, as awesome as CJ Cron has been, those are 2 players that really should be moved for the Rockies. I'm kind of for embracing these prospects, embracing what you believe in, especially as a draft and develop team, and using some of your established pieces to replenish in areas that you're weak. You don't need to add any more position players. If the Rockies make any trades, if they move anybody, it should be for pitching prospects, pitching. You have so many position players. You have so many things you can figure out when it comes to that. And it's way easier to convince position player to come to Coors Field and play than it is to convince pitchers to come to pitch at Coors Field. So if you can take advantage and really replenish your terrible bullpen and your lack of starting pitching depth, you really should move on. As Angel asked, could CJ Cron get traded? That's a one out. If you packaged a Cron, Bard, and even if you wanted to go and make it even crazier, throw a Winton Bernard in there just to add in a utility play there. I mean, that should get you a couple of relievers. That should get you a starter and a reliever. Will they pan out at Coors Field? We'll see. It's a tough place to pitch. It's a tough place for new people to come in to pitch. But you got to make changes, because if the Rockies don't do anything to address pitching this offseason, the product will be the same. You will expect, if the Rockies don't do a lot this offseason, this is an incredibly obvious statement, I know. It's just going to be a rerun of last year. At least we'll see more from prospects, and we'll see what can come from there. But that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Now that you made Locked On Rockies your first listen, why don't you go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast? It's the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, the take of the day. Available on any streaming service. Hey, same with us. We are free and streaming wherever. Thank you to Angel17. Thank you to Stefano Sanchez for joining the live chat today. Remember, subscribe to Locked On Rockies on YouTube so you can be part of the live chat and know when we go live. And hey, hit that review button. Hit those, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a review, hitting that subscribe. All that stuff is a massive help. Anything you do to help the show grow is a major help, I promise. And I really, really appreciate it. But folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long.